What's going on YouTube? It is Primitive here, and today I'm bringing you round 1 of the locals that happened at J&J's the other day. This is going to be between Lord Knight Security Control on the right and Shoutmon DX on the left. Now, although I have shown Lord Knight Security Control on the channel multiple times before, including a decklist profile, this is actually a completely separate list and a completely separate player. I did not even know that they were playing this deck until after I finished my round 1, and I came over and checked on this match and saw what they were playing. So I was very excited to get into this match so that we could see a different type of build of this niche archetype that for whatever reason seems to be gaining a lot of traction here in Colorado. But we're going to see the opponent hard playing a few different champions and getting up to the ultimate, going to get Transcended Sword here. You want to hit that rookie here soon. Luckily for the Shoutmon player, this is probably your best matchup to be hard playing high cost minions, because they're going to have to play so many different cards that are high cost of them themselves, that when you hard play things like champions and ultimates in security control, not only is it beneficial as far as setting up your board to be harder to clear with things like ultimate flare, but it's also just a relatively good strategy versus security control. We're going to see LordKnightmon swing in, deciding to swing security, not worrying about the Greymon, and swinging with Bushi, not blocking with the Monochromon there, which is very interesting because there's nothing really else besides an option card that would threaten the Monochromon from dying there. So I think the Bushi just kind of went in for relatively free when it could have been blocked for free on the other end. But do get 2 checks in, so already the security control player is having a lot of advantage. Another Tamer coming out. That was the card that they just recovered with Holy Wave, so lots of Tamers coming out. So now having the black source on the board for things such as Ultimate Flare. I'm sure there's also cards like Shoutmon and potentially Machinedramon, as we've seen before in the list, but having the Tamers out are the better color sources because they don't really require you to have to make semi-awkward plays to get the color source, that just like when you have to play Machinedramon. But we're gonna see Lord Knight swing and get another Bushi coming out, thinking gonna swing, likely not, because the Monochromon can come out. They did get the free swing last turn, but I do feel like that was a mistake, so this time it's going to get cleaned up. The Monochromon is going to block up on the Bushi, and again, it can't really be swung over. There's nothing that can attack, but we can go ahead and get another Holy Wave to recover. Once again, still sitting super healthy on security. Even though these been swung at multiple times, they just keep recovering. The Gaia Force is going to come out and pop the Monochromon, so this has already been very, very good security. Every single security check has been activate. Another Gaia Force, so these recovers have been absolutely insane, and we even saw the opponent cut their security stack, so this security stack so far has been very, very insane. Gonna hard play the Shoutmon DX, so this is a very weird matchup coming out. This whole game has just been a lot of hard plays. Now, delicate plans coming to hand, but nothing's really going to matter there. Going to hard play Zwart defeat for 15, putting the opponent to 7. That is absolutely insane, because that means that there's no removal for the Shoutmon DX, so it makes sense that the security has been so stacked if they don't have any removal in hand right now, because leaving that Shoutmon is a little scary, especially when you're just digivolve or hard playing a Zwart defeat, which really doesn't develop too much on the board. They are going to digivolve into the Omnimon. Now, this is an interesting play because you don't normally do this unless you're blitzing, but actually, as we see, they're going to digivolve into the X antibody, so that will be able to clear off a couple minions on board, but you don't have any security left, you don't have any blockers on board, and so without that, this might just be game over. Now, this was a little bit of a weird hand from a Shoutmon list, so I wouldn't expect this coming from any other games. Although, like I said, hard playing stuff is not really the worst in this matchup because your opponent has to use so much memory. Not playing a single rookie in your raising is pretty rough, and just having your raising sit there so lonely. The opponent plays Delicate Plan to pass the turn, which is just an effective concede, as there is 2 Digimon on board with no blockers, so we'll take that game. Going into game 2, usually when I play against security control, I usually try to let them go first because they have such high memory cost cards that if you let them go first, they either have to pass or give you a decent amount of memory going into your turn. But we are actually going to see the Shoutmon player decide to go first and just hard drop a Fugumon, so finally hits a rookie with the Agumon there and gonna digivolve into the Monochromon. Now, having the Fugumon out as just a 3-drop, So swinging with the Fugumon, it is so weak that it is very, very likely to die in security. Must have been you're just kind of desperate because you know that if you hit a security that something so weak such as a Fugumon will die, so just getting a swing in does get a check relatively safe without having to worry about you hitting something like a Transcendent Sword or a Gaia Force, which could pop this Omni Shoutmon, or if this becomes a Shoutmon. So I actually am a big fan of that Fugumon swing. Although you could have developed on top of it, I really think it's a relatively fine swing. You're going to have to do a lot of offensive checks, and if you don't want to rely on Shoutmon doing multiple swing checks, which honestly isn't the most consistent flowchart for this matchup, because even if you get Shoutmon and swing for 3-4 swings, the chances that you hit something in security that does delete it, such as a Gaia Force, we are actually going to see the Holy Wave recover on the first check, and the second check hit the Zwart Defeat. So now we have a free Zwart Defeat on board, which easily swings over the Zieg. So it's very good momentum shift for the security control player, because that Zieg, if it didn't die there, was going to have a decent chance of surviving unless you wanted to hard play an option. But being able to swing over your opponent's Mega for relatively free at the exchange of just a security card is a very good momentum shift. As we see, we're going to have the Tai and Mat come out, which is a relatively good card in this matchup. That Zwart Defeat is likely going to stay there for most of the game. Actually, it's going to immediately die in security. But so I was going to say, Zwart Defeat is a very sticky card that was going to stay there, and you'd get the memory off of Tai and Mat. But it ends up hitting one of the few cards in the security stack that could delete it, and there was no Digimon on the opponent's side of the board to be able to get effectiveness from the on deletion effect. So we're going to swing, and now the board is cleared on both ends, so this is a pretty fresh game. Although the Shoutmon player is behind on security checks, I don't think that's a really good indication of how this matchup is going, considering how much recovery the security controller player does. And like I said, when you hard play things like this, it's going to take your opponent's whole memory to really get rid of it, and if it does survive, then you can get a Mega out for relatively cheap. Yeah, we're going to see a Knightmon come out. That's not going to be enough to pop the ultimate here, but you do develop for a LordKnightmon next turn. But now your opponent can develop into a Mega. They have enough memory to Digivolve into something like Zieg if they wanted to, and then they can Digivolve into a Blitz like Shoutmon, or they can Digivolve into the Omnimon here, because you still have enough so you can get one check. Going to hit a TK. I imagine with the amount of different colors in this list, it's going to be very hard to hit yellow cards every single time you TK with this list. So sometimes TK coming out of security when you're running lower on security can be really scary, because you may be forced to take a card that isn't yellow out of your security stack, effectively giving your opponent a free security check. And so now we are going to see the Omnimon. The opponent reveals the security stack, but they are actually swinging over because they can do that with Zieg's Blitz ability. And now it looks like they're okay with the board state. There are a couple things that could happen when the security stack is shown. It looks like both players are just okay knowing that it's a Lucemon. That is an advantage for the red player and a disadvantage for the security control player. But when it becomes to these board states, it's up to both players to keep the board state, and if they think that the best is just putting it back even though it's been revealed, then that is the board state we will play. But we are going to see the Ultimate Flare come out thanks to that Izzy, and it only de-digivolves down to the Lava Garuda, but it does get rid of the Omnimon, which is pretty decent, because now you're going to have to digivolve another Mega on top of there if you want to have that ability to safely swing for multiple checks, because if you swing in with your ultimate, it's likely going to die. There's way too many things in the security that can kill off an ultimate that has less than 10k DP, such as a Transcendent Sword, but when you get to something like a Shoutmon, it's going to be much more resistant to a Transcendent Sword, and you're going to need something more like a Gaia Force. But we do have this out now. Can go ahead and swing for the one check, which we know is the Lucemon. And so now, in my opinion, unless there is very, very good removal in the security control player's hand, then this is looking very, very good for the Shoutmon player. They are going to swing, hit the Izzy, no black cards in there, so no chance of gaining the memory, and swinging the second check thanks to Tai and Mat's ability, which is just a Pulsemon. So now the opponent has a Fuga, a Omnimon, and a Monochromon blocker to the opponent's 3 swings. So going to play Magna-Angemon to recover 1, but the chances that you hit something that's going to save you here is very, very low. Going to swing Delicate Plan and hit Holy Wave, and Fugumon will swing for game. And so now the series is tied up 1-1, and we're going into game 3. So Security controls players, option to choose who goes first. Like I said, in this matchup, I usually don't see security control going first when they get the option, so this actually went on the opposite end both times. The Shoutmon player went first game 2 when I had assumed that they would have their opponent go first, and then game 3 the security control player went first when I think that they would let their opponent go first. So they end up just passing the turn. Like I said, when you make your security control player opponent go first, they either have to pass or play something like a tamer, which puts you at 4, so you're always going to be at least around 3 memory. They can't really do anything for less than that. And so we're going to see a Shoutmon be played, and then a Monochromon build up in the back, playing a Knightmon, deleting the Shoutmon, just trying to get something on the board to develop a LordKnightmon, I'm sure. Now, the Shoutmon player is looking way better in this game right now than the past 2 games, because the other games they've been doing things such as whiffing rookies a lot, and really just hard playing some champions that aren't being too impactful. But we see that this game so far, we're already building up into the Mega. They could go for multiple swings, but is going to decide to swing over the Knightmon. Thanks to Zeeg's ability, this makes it so that the opponent can't go into LordKnightmon, keeping the board and going to force the opponent to play something like a Gaia Force. Now, if the security control player there did not have Gaia Force and instead had something like Transcendent Sword, this would be a very, very scary game, because allowing a Shoutmon that has a security attack plus boost swing into your security is going to be very scary. As a security control player, you mostly want one security check at a time going through, because if your opponent gets a couple successful security checks from one Digimon, then you can start to fall behind. We are going to see the Lava Garuda coming out, putting the opponent at 4, and now this, again, I am a big fan of playing Ultimates versus the security control matchup, because they have to play such large memory cards that they aren't going to be able to easily remove something like this Lava Garuda, and you can now just go into a Mega for relatively free. You see the Eden's Javelin gets hit, decides to target the Lava Garuda instead of popping the Gaussmon. I'm wondering this is a good play to kind of prevent Digivolving, because if you give your opponent the minus and they Digivolve and swing, then Shoutmon can die to a Transcendent Sword, or really any other DP reduction comes out if they don't Digivolve. So going to go into Zeeg, putting the opponent at 0, so can still go into a Blitz if they want. But with the minus DP reduction, which I assume has to be 6 or 7k, I couldn't see the hand size there, you probably don't want to be swinging right now. So going to put the opponent at 2 with BO, and then gaining 2 memory with the tie-in mat. Now that there's a level 6 on board, so with both players having tie-in mat on board, having a level 6 is just going to be more resources for their opponent. And both players are playing Omnimon, so if the Shoutmon player swings in security and hits a Zwart defeat, for example, it could be pretty unfortunate. But again, if you do blitz into the Omnimon, you do get a couple checks. So I think the tie-in mat does put a lot of pressure on both players to think about those Omnimons whenever they could come out, and how to play around that, because as the security control player, you really just kind of have to get lucky in your security and hope that what you hit is going to be enough to deal with the cards that your opponent has. Biomon going to die a terrible death by hitting the Valderarm insecurity, didn't even stand a chance. Now the red player is thinking Digivolving the Monochromon, which puts their opponent at 1, so choking the security control player, which is slightly irrelevant just because, like I said, it doesn't really matter if you put them at 5 memory or not. They're probably going to use it all within 1 card, so putting your opponent at 1 just makes it so when you pass back, you have more memory. As we see now, the ultimate does go down to a Gaia Force, but you do have 7 memory now, which gives you a lot to do. Going to see a delicate plan, very interesting. That seems to me like we're going to see a Blitz now. Okay, so delicate plan, going to Blitz, putting the Agumon underneath. Did not put it in the correct location, which is very interesting because I played the Shoutmon player myself and he was very on top of putting the Agumon on the top. But we're going to see a TK hit out of security for the 3rd or 4th time this set. Opponent decides not to cut, and second check, and hits the Izzy. Now, I'm sure there's probably a couple people who are slightly confused because this is not the most known knowledge, but Delicate Plan does have an official errata on the card. So although the card does say prevent any security effects from coming out, there is an official errata that actually just says you stop all option card securities. So the Delicate Plan doesn't actually stop the Tamers from coming out, even though it does seem like it would say that because of how the card text is. But there is an official errata. You can see it on the DigimonCard.com website if you are interested in knowing about that. But if you are interested on the Delicate Plan, why these Tamers are coming out, that was not a misplay. That is the official errata, so that did play correctly. Now the Digimon comes out, which is good for getting some recovery in. You want to have as many checks as possible when your opponent is going for these multiple swings, so that way you have a highest chance of hitting the security cards that you need, because there's already been multiple Gaia Forces gone through, so the chances of hitting Gaia Force have gone down a lot, and so you may need to do multiple DP reductions to get rid of Shoutmon, such as Eden's and Transcendent Sword, or potentially get a Omnimon out and then hit a Transcendent Sword. But as of right now, this Shoutmon is looking relatively good on board, going to be able to get multiple checks, gets a second check, or gets even more checks now thanks to the red tie that's on board. So really going to just shred through this security right now and get the tie. Now the Holy Wave's going to come out, and that does get another security, so that's actually a really good play for the opponent, because if they just went into Omnimon there, which we see that they do, it actually would hit 4 games. So the security control player got a little bit of a saving grace from that Holy Wave, being able to survive one more turn. But with how it's looking right now, still not super amazing. Digimon is going to swing and drop the Lucimon, and so that does help, but there is a Digimon in raising, so they can just promote, swing that one security, and then swing again if they do get through. So we're going to need to see some more recovery or some sort of removal here, but like I said, without the Gaia Force, there's no way to get rid of this Omnimon, and even if you did have the Gaia Force, the Omnimon has the level 6 underneath it to prevent it, so really not looking in the most amazing spot. Plays a Pulsemon, but unless you're putting like a blocker on there or something, it really doesn't matter too much. Here comes the Holy Wave coming out, which again is going to have to hit something to kill this Fugamon, because this Omnimon is going to get multiple checks, because it gets at least one check with the tie-in mat and any other checks with the inheritable underneath it. And so hit the Digimon and hits the Izzy, but that won't matter because the Fugamon goes in 4 games. So that's going to do it for round 1. That was a very good, very close set. It was back and forth those multiple games. It was really one-sided the first game and then came back those next 2 games. So good job to the Shoutmon player, who we may see later again in the next rounds. But with that being said, if you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe, because I will have the rest of the rounds of this tournament coming up soon. So with that being said, I hope you have a great day. Peace out.